I hope the sun is shining wherever you are, and that it's been a lovely day. It's been rather hot down here in the south. Well, I say hot. I mean, for April, it's been quite warm, but absolutely lovely. I'm gonna get us going. So, folks, colleagues, welcome along. My name's Lee Middleton. For those of you who don't know me, I'm Chief Executive of the National Youth Agency, and I was just asked to say a few words at the start and maybe a couple of words at the very end. But I just wanted to welcome you to this evening's session, looking at, as we've released the final report on next steps for developing a National Youth Council. We've got some amazing people who are going to be talking to you. So in a minute, I'll hand over to Esther, who will talk you through some of the journey and what's going on. Got our colleague Lashan, Arthur, and amazing our keynote speaker, Laura Lundy. Anybody who knows anything about Youth Voice will know Laura's name and the Lundy model really well, and it's absolute benchmark in how to do things really effectively. I just wanted to say that we it was over a year ago now that unfortunately the British Youth Council, as was, closed its doors very suddenly, and within. And I still remember that day and that week and the kind of fortnight after that very vividly, because within hours of the British Youth Council being announced it's closed, my inbox had filled up, my phone had run out of battery because I'd had so many messages. And clearly, the importance and the power of young people's voices and the role of youth workers and organisations that champion young people's voices was really key and important. But also people feeling that, with the loss of the British Youth Council, there was an absolute cornerstone of the youth sector and society and the country as a whole that was really important in holding that together, that was seemingly gone. And it was a boldish move from our board at the NYA to say, well, we'll see what we can do. What can we do? So we, by hook and by crook and a bit of luck, managed to buy the assets of the British Youth Council, and we've subsequently sort of done amazing work taking on the UK Youth Parliament, which has grown since we took it forward, and it's really exciting. But at the fundamental heart of everything was that we would restore a National Youth Council for the UK with young people at the absolute heart of it, steering it, driving it, and at the right point in time, we would hand it off to somebody, hand it off to young people and their supporters to continue. But it was important it had to be done carefully and successfully, and not rushed, because if you rush these things, they could fall over too quickly. So I'm really pleased, and I just want to say thank you. So many people I can see on the call who's joined this. Have rung us, called us, met with us, partnered with us, supported us. I'm amazed the academic community came running at us and said, right, how do we help you? What can we do? Politicians, funders. And I think a huge collaborative effort across our space to sort of bring everyone together to look at what the next steps for a National Youth Council would be. I think whilst the loss of BYC, very sad, and particularly for the staff and the young people involved, which we must always remember, actually, there is a real opportunity when you get a sort of slight blank slate, even if there's history, to look at things and look at how things are done, why they're done, what might be done differently, how to learn, shape that, bring in new generations of young people to take command and control and support and drive that. And that's exactly what we committed to doing. So I know some people might feel a bit frustrated that this hasn't happened quicker, but actually to do Youth Voice well takes time and takes much significant skill and commitment. And I think that's what the NYA has tried to do with this. From now on, it's the National Youth Council, and we'll be developing that, and Esther will talk you through that. So I just want to say thank you to all those youth workers, all those organisations, all those partners that have come around the table, from government departments, all sorts of people. You wouldn't believe the number of meetings I'm sure Esther's had with stakeholders. It's kept her very busy for her 6 months secondment to the original work. And I'm really pleased to say our board has extended the resource to continue Esther and the team's work and bringing more of that together, so we make sure we see this through to a successful output. So that's amazing. Young people at the absolute centre of it, and we wouldn't have it any other way. So with no further ado, I will hand over to Esther and say, well done, Esther, for all the work you've done, because you've really driven this, working with young ambassadors and young people, and anybody who'll listen has had you bouncing up in front of them. So you've done an amazing work, and just to pay tribute to you and the team. And yeah, I'll hand over to you to sort of take us to the next steps.
Thanks, Lee. I think there's probably going to be a number of people on this call that are sick of the sight of me. I'm definitely sick of the sound of my voice, but hopefully you won't have to listen to too much of me today. But for those of you that don't know me, my name's Esther, and I am the National Strategic Lead for Youth Voice within NYA, and the National Youth Council has been a project that I've been working on since September last year. So I'm just going to start today's session just by running you through the sort of the process, a very whistle-stop timeline, and then the process. So just again, starting from, I know people on here will have different levels of understanding of BYC and the British Youth Council and what it stood for and what it did. So I just kind of pick out a few poignant points along the timeline. I know it's not this simplistic, so please, anybody on here, don't think I've just kind of condensed it into this because I'm not giving it due respect. This is just to give it a whistle-stop tour of what BYC went through. So in 1948, we know that the BYC was established by the Foreign Office, and that was an international response to protect young people and to educate young people in democracy and politics. And it was a response to the rise of Nazi fascism and the sort of Hitler Youth regime, and everybody came together and said, right, we need to provide opportunities for our young people to learn and understand about politics and about democracy. And that was when the British Youth Council was established. And as I said, it began part of the Foreign Office, part of the UK government. In 1960s, it became an independent charity. And although still funded in some way by the government, it also had to go out and then find some more diversification in some funding. And it also allowed it to kind of have a bit more say and freedom over its mission, its core values, and its purpose. In the 1970s, the World Assembly of Youth was hosted in the UK, and it was given the credit that it deserved. And our Prime Minister then gave the keynote speech. And it was, you know, a really good, exciting time for the British Youth Council and UK young people. In the 1980s, BYC was instrumental in the UK signing the UN Conventions on the Rights of the Child, something obviously that we are still adhering to today. And then in the 1990s, the core kind of funding that was coming from government started to really dissipate, and so BYC had to spend a lot of time thinking about diversification of funding, building up those traded services, the more commercial contracts, looking for kind of core grants. And it was a time where they had to think about what was going to help them in their vision and mission to be a sustainable charity and a sustainable charity for youth voice and young people across the UK. In the 2000s, BYC collaborated with the European Youth Forum to facilitate what was then the largest consultation of young people across the UK. And that consultation led to the development of a research paper with the European Youth Forum, which was published. So it was a fantastic piece of work. In 2011, UK Youth Parliament came and joined BYC, and there were a number of reasons for that. And that meant then that the British Youth Council was responsible for the UK Youth Parliament and the National Youth Council, as well as the ambassador programme that was kind of around. And so it was a really interesting and fruitful time for the organisation. And then, unfortunately, due to a number of contributing factors, with the loss of core grant funding, Brexit and the loss of Erasmus funding, loss of funding from the government, in 2024, BYC entered administration. And then that's when NYA decided that they would step in and purchase what was left in terms of assets and try and support those remaining young people that were still engaging in projects, and also see what we could do next. What were the next steps for this particular project? And then that's where I come in. So next slide, please. That's just so basically, yeah, I was asked to deliver a UK-wide listening exercise. And as you know, this is a multifaceted space where we're not looking at just the youth sector. You know, it crosses boundaries. The youth voice and youth influence is something I think that really kind of breaks down barriers. And so I had to ensure that not only was I looking at geographical barriers, but also looking at kind of professional barriers and the barriers to youth participation and youth voice, and speak to as many people as possible and try to understand what has happened at to this point and what they would see as potential solutions moving forward. How could we potentially build back bigger and stronger as we move forward. So I split the project into 2 phases, phase 1 and phase 2. From September to December 2024, I facilitated one-to-one discussions, lots of desk research, an online consultation, and we facilitated youth-led focus group activity, and I'll go into that in a bit more detail in a moment. And in phase 2, which is January to the end of March, or kind of now really, if you think about it, we conducted all the data analysis. We have written and produced and published the recommendations report, and we've worked with the Funders Collective, the government and our growth team, as well as many other partners, to kind of look at what a business plan and pitch would be for this particular programme moving forward. How do we make our recommendations a reality? Next slide, please. So the desk research, which was through September to January, enabled me to kind of review the existing systems and structures that existed within BYC, and also able to look at the financial information. What led to 2024? How did BYC end up in that situation? And were there any kind of contributing factors that we could have mitigated, perhaps? And what's the learning from that? And then we had a look at we reviewed the stakeholders' experience, and that's not just your membership organisations, but it's also your partners, when it's not just your partners within the UK, but also your partners further afield in Europe and the Commonwealth. And then I worked with my research associates with our research colleagues within our organisation to do the data analysis of that insight, and that fed into our recommendations. Next slide. And next was a digital consultation. So we launched it in Youth Work Week 2024, which is November. And I worked with a number of different stakeholders to co-produce questions that we could use within this space that were appropriate, and as I say, that were owned and collaborative, and were not just questions that were coming from an MYA. This was not an MYA exercise. This was a sector-wide exercise. This was a UK youth voice and influence exercise. So we needed to make sure that all stakeholders were involved. The survey closed in December, and we got around 350 submissions, so a little bit more. And again, I worked with colleagues to analyse that data, and all of that information was fed into our recommendations. Next slide, please. And then again, launched in Youth Work Week, we wanted to ensure that youth voice was central to this process, and we wanted to do this as authentically as we could do. I don't think I've mentioned it before, but if I haven't, we have no budget for this, and all of the work to the date has come directly from MYA reserves. So all of the money that we've kind of pushed into this, I've had to really be quite fruitful with, and which, you know, I'm used to being. I'm a youth worker, but yeah, we had to think about how we could get the most out of the situation. Obviously, we know that there are far better ways of implementing youth voice and influence within this process, especially around the youth-led focus group activity, but we did what we could within the parameters that we had. So we delivered 2 co-production sessions where we had 53 participants engaging in those. And together we developed 3 different resources: a topic guide, a how-to guide, and a glossary. And we had submissions from youth groups in NCS Ambassadors, the Young Lives Foundation, the Medway, Be Well, Berkshire Youth, Kinetic Youth, Groundwork UK, the Scouts, and Sheffield Youth Council. And again, all of that data and insight, I sat down with my research colleagues, analysed it, and it fed into our recommendations. Next slide, please. And all of the recommendations, all of that data, all of that insight, we've managed to get the results of that to fall across 9 different themes. So we've got recommendations within governance, membership, stakeholder engagement, stuff around the delivery model, how should it look, stuff around the service delivery, training, grant giver, council facilitation, how's it going to work, stuff around funding models, stuff around EEDIB, is making sure that that's part of the skeleton and not just an add-on. This is something that's going to drive the work that we're going to do moving forward. International portfolios, and the academic research collaborations. Now, what I will stress at this point is these are just recommendations. This is coming from all the data and insight and analysis that we've done. but young people need to move this forward now, and young people and colleagues supporting them to do that. So this is just out there to give us a framework to work within. This is not us saying this is how it should look. And that's the point where hopefully I can now hand over, I believe, to Arthur, who has very kindly given up his time today to come and talk to us about his experience and and help facilitate some discussion with Laura Lundy.
Awesome. Thanks. Yeah, very excited to be here talking about some of the recommendations from the reports. Mainly, I don't know, could we have the slides, please? I think, yeah. Awesome. Thank you. Yeah, brilliant. Yeah, so I'm mainly just going to be talking about some of the recommendations from the report that stood out to me as a young person and somebody who talks and thinks about participation way too much. But I definitely encourage you to go and read kind of the full version of the recommendations within the report. But yeah, just as a bit of an introduction, so hi, I'm Arthur, and I'm one of the National Youth Agency's youth consultants. So we were recruited last July, I think, and we're a team of 7 young people who provide feedback, scrutinise documents, co-create resources, really do whatever the NYA needs with regard to youth participation and influence. It's been really exciting so far. It's been quite a while so far. I've got another residential coming up soon. We each have different experiences within youth work and participation, so we can really have quite insightful and fruitful discussions and the projects that we're involved with. Now, in particular, within most of the conversations, I talk about a lot of my work, which focuses on advocacy for the UNCRC, the Convention on the Rights of the Child, with a particular focus on Article 12, all the way, as I like to say, the right to be heard and listened to. I'm also a self-proclaimed Lundy Model superfan, so this is definitely a bit of a bucket list day for me. Yeah, anyway, next slide, please. Yeah, so the first kind of set of recommendations that really stood out to me was particularly in the governance section, but around a youth-led structure with support. So just to run through some of the recommendations, so establish a robust and effective governance model, principles of youth leadership, whilst ensuring appropriate structures are in place for necessary support and guidance, including the facilitation of the election of a youth-led executive board with a strong mandate to lead and make decisions grounded in evidence, and develop and implement a comprehensive terms of reference for a UK-wide advisory expert board who will play a crucial role in supporting youth-led governance structures. So yeah, they really stood out to me. Now, I've been involved in a lot of different participation opportunities over quite a few years, from consultation, co-production, and youth-led. For a few years, I ran kind of a youth-led group or project, which was really interesting, and I learned a lot from. And that's definitely shown to me the value of youth-led participation. It's a powerful way to ensure services and systems are truly centred around young people, their voices, their opinions, perspectives, and creativity. These opportunities promote authentic engagement, enabling young people to really influence and make change within the projects that they care about, whilst developing valuable skills. I know I've got so much from the youth-led projects that I've been involved with previously. But I also kind of wanted to acknowledge, especially from my experience, that youth-led is challenging. It's difficult. It's definitely the hardest form of participation that I've been involved with. And it can, in some cases, bring additional risks for the organisation and the young people involved. Now, something that I've definitely learned along the way is it's important to acknowledge these elements, but this shouldn't be a reason to avoid youth-led participation. Instead, I see this as motivation to develop a strong support mechanism focused on learning and growth, which is why I kind of called this section for me, or this reflection element, the balancing act, because it's ensuring young people's voices are centred and they're leading the process, but they have that support structure that they can fall back to. It can be hard to kind of find the right element of support, the ways that the young people want that to go and what works best for the project, but it's all about kind of adapting and finding what works for everyone involved, so their voices are centred, but there's the support to learn and develop as needed. Next slide, please. Yeah, so the next section that really, again, stood out for me. I think this was partially because one of my university modules that I was doing at the time was called The Local and the Global. But essentially, this got me thinking kind of about how local, national, and international systems shape each other. And this really came through two particular recommendations within the report. So that within the membership model section, so develop and strengthen a UK-wide network that brings together organisations, leaders and practitioners from across the 4 nations. Now, I'm from Wales, so it's always great when it's about kind of sharing knowledge across borders and things like that. I am definitely a fan of the story of participation in Wales. I may or may not have a bookshelf with all of the old reports from like the 90s. Yeah, anyway. But I think there's a lot that we can share and that we can learn from across the UK. So it was great to kind of see a focus on that form of collaboration. And similarly with international work. So one of the particular recommendations was ensure the full and effective delivery of the UK Young Ambassador Programme and remain active in global youth governance structures. So I thought these were very interesting as it's focused on relationships and connections between local, national, and international. Yeah, the National Youth Council would definitely be strengthened by embracing this relationship, bringing together young people and professionals from all 4 nations whilst facilitating their engagement in global dialogue as well. And there's loads of great work and really impressive case studies going on, both within kind of local communities, within the devolved nations, and internationally as well. So it's really great to be able to share that. And yeah, connection was really something that stood out for me and really does stand out for me within children's rights and participation as a whole. And I really think that kind of connecting across borders and geography really helps to kind of make this unique and strong example of kind of participation in this way. Next slide, please. Yeah, so these were the 3 recommendations that I really loved, but I didn't really know how to like bring them all together. So I've just kind of shared them individually. So the first one was plan for future success. So develop a comprehensive 5-year strategic plan that serves as a roadmap for long-term success, aligning with the organisation's overarching mission, vision, and core objectives. This should outline key milestones, set measurable goals, and establish clear evaluation mechanisms. Yeah, I'm a big fan of a plan. I love writing kind of strategies and things and just planning my own life generally. And I think that's a really great way to think about what do we want the National Youth Council to achieve and how are we going to get there? What steps do we need to take? Who's going to be involved? How does that kind of fit within the overarching participation kind of space? Yeah, and obviously these kind of plans need to be adapted, but I think it's good to have that vision and to know where you want to go and where you want to end up. The next point I really loved because young people in research, co-research, youth-led research, all those kind of formats are something that I definitely love and something that I've got a lot out of. In my spare time, I definitely love going to conferences and banging on about how academics and researchers can engage with young people. So the recommendation here was investigate opportunities for young researchers within higher education institutions by leveraging funding to develop, train and support young people to complete rigorous academic research. This will equip young people, young researchers, as it has with me many, many times, with the skills to conduct, analyse and present credible research. Now, I really love this. Generally, I think research is maybe quite like an area that young people feel is a bit alien, but I think it comes into our lives in so many different ways. Comes back to that decisions being grounded in evidence point. And yeah, I think when young people in particular can collaborate and can learn from researchers, that can really strengthen research, particularly when it's about young people kind of being for and with them. Which I think is great. And I think there's also a lot that researchers, of course, can learn from young people within these processes. Now, the final point that I wanted to highlight as I kind of called it democracy discussions, but the recommendation is examine the role of constitutional democracy in youth political engagement and the extent to which young people can influence policy issues. Engaging young people in research could generate new insights and contribute to discussions on democratic reform and youth inclusion in governance. Now, what really stood out to me about this was that idea of the research that's conducted and that recommendation then informing these kind of discussions and changes within kind of democratic reform and youth inclusion in governance. And I really love that because I've been trying to get this in, but to quote the next speaker, voice is not enough. So I really liked that element of being able to use that research to inform positive change, to have an influence on these different areas. And yeah, I really liked how that was tied in. Now, these are just some of the recommendations that I particularly loved on my first read through, that as, you know, a young person, but also, yeah, again, I literally have an Article 12 poster over there. These were ones that really resonated with me, but I would 100% encourage you to take a look through the reports, read through the recommendations, and have a bit of a reflection about how these can link within your work. And yeah, I think there's opportunity for kind of greater dialogue and reflection around these different areas. I have no idea how long I've been talking for, but on that, I think I'm going to introduce the legend that is Professor Laura Lundie, creator of the Lundy model. Yeah, over to you.
Hi, Arthur. Thank you so much. I'm thinking the legend that is Arthur. I've been asked so often recently that, you know, could I get myself a clone? And I think I've just found my clone. I found my person who can step in on the Lundy model for me. That's wonderful, you know. So we're going to have a conversation rather than me give a formal talk, and Arthur and I are just going to get in a dialogue with Arthur leading it. So I'm looking forward to this and see how we get on.
Yeah, awesome. Okay.
Yeah.
Well, as it's been mentioned a little bit, I thought we should probably talk about the Lundy model to start with. You want to give a brief summary?
Yeah, I'm really sorely tempted to ask you to do it, but I won't put that pressure on you. But I'm sure you could do an incredible version of this. But I mean, I'm sure many people, and in fact, I know many people in the room are aware of it, and many people use it in their work, which is just wonderful. But for those of you who aren't familiar with it, my name is Laura Lundie. I'm a professor of children's human rights. Arthur and I share the same passion for looking at this through a human rights lens, through Article 12. And many years ago, really, in fact, 12 years, 12, 20, my goodness, can't count. 20 years ago, after a project here in Northern Ireland, where I live, I started thinking about this notion of voice and youth voice and people voice and all sorts of things, and thinking, as Arthur said, that it really wasn't working. And I wrote a paper called Voice is Not Enough. And in that paper, I suggested really that if we want to have meaningful child participation or youth participation, it needs more than voice. And I said it needed space and voice and audience and influence. Space making sure that young people have opportunities to that are safe and voluntary. That voice, they can express themselves freely in a medium of their choice. Audience is making sure their views get to the right people and that they listen carefully, and the right people are the people who can bring about change. And then finally, you know, the Holy Grail, which is influence, that young people are taken seriously, that their views are taken into account, and crucially, that they know what happens to them, that they're given immediate feedback that what has happened, what's happening now, what will happen, what can't happen, why can't it happen. And so together it's space, voice, audience, and influence are what are now called, not by me, but by someone else, the Lundy model. And it's an approach that's used a lot in the recommendations, the report. And Esther, you know, well done. I read it again today. It's an incredible amount of work and so well put together and so easy to read, even though it's, you know, there's so much in it. A lot of people would use it and call it voice and influence, which, you know, you have. And I think that is really sensible in a way. And in recent years, I started thinking about, you know, where does space and voice and audience and influence come together? And I realize now that essentially Space is all about creating the right conditions for voice, that young people can speak freely about the things that matter to them. And then audience is creating the conditions for influence, that we have the right people involved, so that whenever young people take the time, to talk about the things that really matter and what they want in their lives, and generally that we get it to people who can bring about change. So that's where voice and influence comes into. Is that good enough? Do you want to add anything to that, Arthur? What would you have added had you been doing it?
Not much really. Like obviously, like I'm no expert compared to you, but like for a young person, it's definitely a great way to kind of break down Article 12, because I think, you can quite easily get stuck within kind of like the numbers of it all. But I think it's really knowing kind of what you're entitled to and be able to hold kind of the people, who are maybe running an opportunity to account based on that. Yeah, and kind of have a sense of ownership over what Article 12 and participation and the right to be heard really means. Yeah.
Yeah, no, thank you, because you raised an important thing, which I didn't say. I suppose I started by saying, my background is law and human rights, and you said the same. I know how, the work that you have done on, promoting the knowledge of the Convention on the Rights of the Child generally, not just 12, which is fantastic. And then linking back to Esther, going through the history of the British Youth Council starting in 1948, it all feels like it all matches, because 48, of course, is the beginning of the UN Declaration of Human Rights, the start of the UN human rights journey, I suppose. And you mentioned the word accountability, and that's the key word for us. I should have really said that, because ultimately I come at youth participation, youth voice from a human rights perspective, and it's always about accountability. It's always about accountability for the promises that governments have made young people. And so I'm really glad you added that. So thank you for that.
Yeah, awesome. Yeah, the next kind of point that I thought would be good to discuss was about case studies and kind of examples of, strong participation structures, particularly kind of internationally and in the UK as well. But any that you'd kind of like to highlight within particular relevance to kind of the National Youth Council and things like that moving forward.
Yeah, I mean, there's so much learning. I mean, again, Esther's gathered a lot of the learning from the British Youth Council and beyond. It's probably, if you've heard me speak before, where I've done a lot of work. It has been in the south of Ireland, which is our, nearest neighbour. And I think it's very hard to go past what they have done. And funny, I was reading something else this morning, and it reminded me of this, that their Donlan Og, which is the National Youth Parliament for Ireland, it's in its 23rd year, so it's way behind what the BYC was, but it's still 23rd, 24th, I think maybe even the 24th year of it functioning. And it's really healthy and it's really well funded, and it's at the heart of government. And that's exactly the kind of ambition that we would want for ours, wouldn't it? You'd want that kind of impression. And also, of course, it's not just that. It sits within a broader, bigger culture of child and youth participation, which is the way that the local councils, youth councils are funded, the way there's funding through government, through other agencies, so you just have that big cross-national, well, they have a national strategy on child and youth participation, which would be an incredible thing to have in each of the developed nations, and for the national agency, the National Council as well. So I think Ireland's very hard to go past. But again, I always give a wee shout out, and I know there are quite a few of them in the audience, including, of course, Esther and LaShawn. We do have the Lundy Model Network, which is a kind of a loose, well, it's not a loose, it's incredibly together group of experts, mainly across the UK. There's incredible expertise across the UK. In fact, sometimes when I'm in Europe, they'll say, "Is everything come from the UK and Ireland?" Because we have just had such a history of it. And I think there's a lot to be harnessed in terms of good examples of practices and governance, and working within, tight budgets, and being really inclusive, and all of the challenges that we always have in youth participation. So I think we can look local and global, as you pointed out from your university module, for examples of good practice.
Yeah, awesome. Yeah, I definitely like, and when I go to different conferences and things, there's always kind of so much, like my notebooks are full from kind of great case studies from internationally and the UK as well. Yeah, brilliant. The next question I really had was kind of about the National Youth Council within the, I guess, like the youth participation space, and what role you feel
Yeah.
that will have, making it kind of distinctive and useful for everybody else working within the sector.
I just think it's absolutely crucial that this exists. It's just, you know, what happened, you know, as Lee said to the BYC was just so sad, but so disappointing. It's in the sense that the UK, that has been leading in this space globally for so long, does not have this kind of core council that, you know, so many other countries are now putting together and putting funding into. So what purpose? Your question is really, what purpose does that serve? I think it's incredibly important always, okay? But I feel personally, and I'm talking to you in Wales and me sitting in Belfast, I think it's incredibly important when you have a nation like ours with devolved aspects, that there is an umbrella organization where young people can come together, not just to discuss, but mainly I suppose it's to discuss issues that are of cross-cutting and national concern, because there are things that are decided for the nation as a whole that are not decided in the devolved nations. In fact, with Wales, Scotland and Northern Ireland, we all have very different devolved powers, and we have, you know, our assemblies and parliaments have different things that they are able to decide on. So you do need that space, you know. And then also I think it's incredibly important that we have the space where you can share, because the way that our nations have worked out, we do different things in different ways. And sometimes, you know, Scotland can be doing an amazing thing here and Wales there, and Northern Ireland or England or aspects of, you know, other regions within England. I mean, I know that Catherine Enever's there doing incredible things down in Cornwall. You know, we need a space where you bring that all to the table, you know, and that you can start to share. So there is a compelling case for having a National Youth Council. And it's embarrassing not to, you know, it really is embarrassing that we don't have it anymore, you know, so it's time to get it back and running. Yeah.
Yeah, I definitely agree. I think within Wales, like it's been, I think, very clear that we have, you know, I know like my local youth council, there's loads of great work. I've been a member for many, many years now. And then we kind of have the Welsh Youth Parliament and Children in Wales, who are also doing great work. But it's kind of that next step with the issues that aren't devolved, kind of where that goes and where can we kind of talk and learn and share with each other, essentially. Yeah.
And join on, and you know, there's so many campaigns that cross-cut, you know, whenever you go out. I mean, obviously I've done work with the Northern Ireland Youth Assembly, and it's, you know, a lot of the issues turn up then in the Scottish Youth Parliament. There are lots of kind of core issues, you know, Votes at 16, where we can learn. It's from Scotland, for example, or mental health, which is, you know, every young person, all of those, you know, there's just so many issues that cross-cut that there is a space to get together on.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, awesome. Yeah, the next question leads on great, which was just a bit more about the devolved context, I guess, and kind of how that will change, or how that will impact the National Youth Council, maybe making it unique, or however you kind of see that, I guess.
Yeah, I think, I mean, I've started to touch on that, I suppose, in my response to your last question, but reading the report again, there's been really careful thought put to that, to look at, you know, what worked and what didn't maybe work so well previously. And I think it's actually crucial to its success that it becomes this, you know, inclusive, representative across the four nations. And again, as I said, part of that is just the sharing of good practice. And part of that is the reality of the way that the country functions, and that there are some things that are done on a national basis, and that we need young people to have a space to discuss them and shape them the way we do with everything else. But also, and it's one of the things that you picked up, I suppose, you know, whenever you have the international representation, that idea that it's really important that we have these routes to influence things internationally. We've lost influence there, and there couldn't be a more important time in the world, you know, for young people to be shaping some of the conversations that are happening with all of the challenges that are out there. And again, that has to represent, I think, all of the very different ways that these issues impact our young people. across the UK and including in the devolved nations. So, of course, you and I have a very particular take on this because we're sitting in them. They're sitting in two of the devolved nations, and we often feel that that as Esther pointed out, in the report, that things can seem more England centric. So I think it's really, really important that this exists and that we get that right. Yeah.
Yeah, 100%. Nothing really to add there. Like, I definitely, I know, like, when I'm in meetings, I definitely try and be the voice of Wales as much as I
You
can.
do.
But
And
thanks.
and can I ask you then,
Yeah.
what do you think, whenever you're in the groups, or even in this group that you were in the consultation for this, what do you think, for example, as a young Welsh person, that's distinctive that you bring to those conversations?
Ooh, that's a good question. Yeah, I think, like, the story around children's rights and participation in Wales is interesting. Like, I don't know loads about the participation side, but I think, we had like national participation standards that we still have now that have been working for ages. I definitely advocate for them to be updated slightly because I think they're like 25 years old. But I think the idea of kind of holding local authorities to account using those standards has been really interesting, and there's a lot we can learn from that. Also, Cardiff, it's the UK's first child-friendly city. Just putting
Yeah,
that
I saw
out there.
that recently. Yeah. Well done, Cardiff.
Yeah. So I definitely think there's a lot that we can kind of share about that journey as well, and the kind of local authority structures within that, and then how that can play into the kind of national or devolved nation kind of level. Yeah, it's hard to give examples. Like, I've done loads
That's
of really interesting Welsh projects that I would love to talk about with whoever wants to in more detail at another time. But yeah, there's definitely a lot we can kind of learn from. And I know when I've been to other places, we've taken a lot on board as well, equally, like when we've had visits to other places.
Yeah, okay, no, I agree completely with you. I just think there's learning there that's distinctive that needs to get brought to the kind of more general table.
Yeah,
brilliant.
definitely. Yeah. The next question, and I think probably one of the last questions, was about kind of acknowledging I guess, some of the challenges that can come in this process, because anything like this is going to come with challenges. What kind of advice would you give to help hopefully overcome or mitigate these challenges where we can to make this a success for everyone involved?
Yeah, I suppose, that the obvious one, but I'm not going to dwell on it, is, because of the history, is that there is some sort of secure funding. We can't get past this. If we want this to work, and it has to be funded. It can't be done in a shoestring from an extra budget. It has to be properly funded. So that is crucial, especially I think in these early stages of it, to let it find its feet. And this leads to my next point, because the challenge, and I really like, again, the way that this has been done, as all good youth participation should be done. The detail has yet to come, because it has to come from young people themselves. Do you know? And that is always what I love about when I write grants. It's my own work as a researcher, and you're having to say, oh, I don't know yet. We haven't asked young people that. We haven't decided yet. We don't know. There's always that level of uncertainty, and that's exactly how it should be. So that's going to be both challenging and exciting, because it hasn't been fully formed, and nor should it have been fully formed. So the funding, the engagement of young people, and then the standard two things, this comes from putting the Lundy model on it. The two things that, generally speaking, are the hardest elements, leaving aside funding, of child and youth participation are: one, inclusion, just making sure it's a really inclusive space, that the young people really are as diverse as it can be. I don't use the word representative because it's impossible, but it really needs to be diverse, a space for diverse voices. And then the second thing related, I suppose, to audience and influence is that, it makes a difference, and that young people see that and know it. And we know what it's doing, and young people know what it's doing. So, and also decision makers know what it's doing. And I think that will really help it find its feet and secure itself into the future. Those would be what do you think yourself? What do you think what do you think is the biggest challenge?
Yeah, awesome. I think the kind of idea of feedback within it is really crucial, and being able to have the full components of the Lundy model and being able to communicate that with the young people involved, the professionals and other stakeholders involved, but also with the young people more broadly. I think in today's society, feedback can take a different form using like social media and things like that. So I think that there's maybe a role for that to play. So everybody's kind of involved within that conversation. And it's not just necessarily kept to the people who are involved in a particular project. I think using the Lundy model is a great way to keep the success, ensure the success of the project as a foundation, and then for young people who are building on this, like you said, who are kind of filling in the gaps that we need around this framework. I think it's great for them to kind of use that as a bit of a map, use that to hold the people they're in conversations with to account, and I guess to remain grounded by kind of that idea of rights and that idea of wanting to make change and influence, and just see where it goes, let it grow into its own entity. It's great to have a plan, but that plan needs to be adaptable. Yeah.
Yeah, no, that's a good one. You should. I don't know if you're familiar with the work of the Scottish Youth Parliament. There's another Lundy Simple Model fan up in Scotland who's in the
Right.
Scottish Youth Parliament, and not just one, but one in particularly, Craig, and they have done really interesting work on youth-led training,
Mhm.
for decision makers. Using the model, other things as well, not just the Lundy model, but they do some really, really incredible work from a youth-led perspective. And I would love to see that happening, that kind of thing happening on, on the national level as well. It would be really exciting and wonderful.
Yeah, that would definitely be awesome. Any kind of final points on this discussion, things you want to say?
Well, I was asked by someone in a private message who'll remain nameless, do you have a Lundy model t-shirt? No? Were you ever given a
do
Lundy
I
model
have a
t-shirt?
Lundy?
Yes,
I
do
don't
you
have-
personally, Arthur,
Okay.
have a
I
Lundy
don't know
model
if I'm
t-shirt?
allowed to disclose this, but I don't have one from you, but I may or may not have made one on Canva. But yeah, I also have a hoodie. But anyway.
Okay, because I'm down to my last 4. I'm going to get your address and send you one because you
Thanks.
definitely deserve one.
Thank you
For
very much.
sure.
I'll frame it. Like,
Yeah, and you might have to make one for me on Canva too.
deal. Great.
Yeah. No, that's all I have to add. It's an honor to be here. It's a really exciting time. Well done to everybody who's been involved in this, but well done, Esther. Well done to everyone, Arthur with the youth group who worked on this, because it has been a huge amount of work. Oh, Stu's got some. They've all seen it. The chat's going mad with you. They've seen your t-shirt. Is it better than the real thing is what I want to know. What was I going to say? So it's a very exciting and important thing, and I'm really honored to be here to be in this discussion. Thank you. And thank you, Arthur, for the questions.
Yeah. Thanks for chatting. It's been great. I think we had a few minutes for Q&A. I don't know who's leading.
We're going to hand over to LaShawn now. Yeah.
Yes. Hello, everyone. Like I said, thank you for joining us today and taking time out of your day for this important event and launch. I will now be discussing some of the questions that have come through. Obviously, we do have limited time, so please take my apologies in terms of if we haven't answered your questions. But I will start off now and it will go to the panel, so it's a free for all to who's best to answer each question. So the first one is, I'm still digesting the report and its recommendations, but would like to know what next steps are to take this forward. Does the NYA have any thoughts or plans to facilitate a collaborative pathway and funding/support options to support this? How can people help?
Shall I start with that one? So next steps, that's my slide that I finish on. What's next? What does the future hold? So look, we've got an interim group of young people who are helping us, like Arthur was saying, helping us sort of shape some of the preliminary work that we need to do. But as Laura kind of sort of nodded to a minute ago, the detail is not in there yet because it has to come from young people. And so we're kind of in a bit of a chicken and egg situation, in that we really need a membership base so that we can get young people elected and into position, but we won't necessarily have a membership offer right at the start because we don't have any funding to develop that membership offer. But we want young people to build that membership offer. And then obviously there's lots of stuff around governance that we need to work on immediately as well. So I think in terms of next steps, we are open to ideas and collaborative partnerships. We definitely are looking for funding. And we are asking people to kind of really think about, well, how can we pull in the funding to support the right pieces of work? And as Arthur alluded to, next weekend or this weekend, I'm going away with Rashan and Arthur and some of our colleagues with the young consultants to do some kind of strategy thinking around what this could look like and some kind of maybe some operational planning just for the interim period. And we're also looking for perhaps a date in September where we hold, or we work towards that date as the first official AGM for the organisation. So that'll be the date where we can kind of make sure that we get full representation at council level and at steering committee level. We would have had some task and finish groups get us to that point, and then we can kind of see the organisation working in the capacity that we want it to work it to. I could talk forever, so does anybody else have anything to say on that? No?
It's fantastic. Thank you, Esther. I'll just take a few more because I know we're running out of some time. Detty has said, will the new Youth Council for the UK replace the current UK Youth Parliament? Apologies if I've already missed this.
I'm happy to take that again. I can see my colleague on this call, Shane, who is our programme manager for the UK Youth Parliament, and he'd be itching to answer that. Absolutely not. They're completely different. But I do understand why people have not been able to perhaps pull those two identities apart, because over the course of time, when UKYP came into BYC since 2011, there was kind of a lot of blurring of lines, and perhaps people were not necessarily fully clear on UK Youth Parliament programme and the National Youth Council programme, and also the Young Ambassador work, the international portfolio, which they do some incredible work, which hopefully we've outlined in the report. And we've got 4 UK Young Ambassadors in post who are doing some amazing work, and I know we've got some on the call today. But yeah, they are 2 separate identities. UK Youth Parliament is an elected body, a mandated body, and it does its piece of work over there. The National Youth Council is a youth council and a space and a place for youth voice across all levels, not just within Parliament.
Thank you for clarifying. I'm just taking 2 more questions. Apologies, like I said, for not answering all of them, but you can email us on our website. First question I'm going to take is from Ryan Spencer. So this council is brilliant in representing diverse voices, as Laura has said. What are the key factors that should be prioritised in ensuring that there's long-term sustainability of the National Youth Council?
I mean, I'm happy to take it again, but does someone else want to jump in? Lee, do you want to
Arthur,
say
what do you
anything?
think? I'd love to know what you think, Arthur.
Yeah, sure. Well, I think the obvious one is like acknowledging the funding, and there's great recommendations in the report about that. I don't know much about it. But I would say adaptability is crucial. Obviously, like the young people who are involved are going to change, and what they want from this kind of program is going to change. So I think being open to that and moving kind of with the times and with the mechanism that young people want this to be, allowing that to change as well. Yeah, I think the collaboration and the partnerships and the membership element of it is really crucial, kind of coming together, being able to use it kind of as that mechanism and as that connecting voice, I guess, would really help to, again, help with the adaptability, but also yeah, to ensure that there's those structures supporting it as well, and that the value of this of the National Youth Council is really seen and acknowledged.
Thank you for that, Arthur. And I'll just also add, obviously, capacity building is really, really important, and raising the profile, so justifying you know, the outcomes, why it's necessary, how it's supported young people in youth leadership, and just creating meaningful outcomes as it is. I'll take one more question, which is from William, and it is, how can we engage stakeholders to ensure that we act properly and decisively on the recommendations outlined in the report?
Okay, say that again, Sean, sorry.
Sorry.
One more time.
How can we engage stakeholders to ensure that we act properly and decisively on the recommendations outlined in the report?
I think that's collective action. Arthur, I don't know what you feel about that, but I think it's about ensuring that we've got collective action and representation across the geographical spread that we're talking about, access to the right people. It's the London model, right? Making sure that we've got the voice and that the voice is heard by the right people and that the right people do something with it. And you know, if we can do that well, if we can support, so it's key that the expert advisory group that's going to support the young people that are driving this, it's key that they're in place and in situ, because you know they will carry with them years of experience and expertise and skill set and access to relationships and professional relationships, you know, and I think having them in place that spreads over a geographical kind of map of the UK is what's going to be integral to making sure that this works moving forward. But we do need a varied stakeholder engagement in this, and we would value some sustainable, solid and dependable core funding to deliver the elements of the work that isn't attractive to a lot of people. You know, it's the work that just means that an organisation needs to exist, and that essentially costs money. So if we can find the correct funding sources for that, then I think we'll be set for a good future. Did you want to add anything, Arthur?
Yeah, just briefly, I guess. I think that expert advisory panel is going to play a really crucial role, like you said. And I think the relationship they have with the young people is, especially kind of, you know, the youth consultants, we're going to be kind of acting as that for the next few months until the kind of proper structure is in place. But I think valuing each other's kind of expertise and contribution is going to be really valuable. Yeah, making sure that there's real collaboration, and that kind of course the young people's voices are being listened to, but also there's the space for the experts and the professionals to come in and, yeah, explain their ideas and kind of put that together to create something that hopefully works for everyone involved.
Thank you both. It's definitely a journey that we do want to share with stakeholders from start to finish. And I will now hand over to Lee Middleton to wrap up. Thank you.
Very official, using the surname. Thank you, LaShawn. Folks, I hope we've given you a good, useful hour of your time, and thank you for giving us your time. The report is now published and live, and I'm already seeing from some of our tracking that some of the media have been picking it up, which is really good. I guess I just wanted to sort of cycle back, which is the role of young people in making decisions that affect them is why we're all here. BYC had a sort of, if it had a strap line, it was not about them without, or not about us without us, and we're taking that forward and progressing along those lines. And I think that's why it might be slow, it will be methodical, but it will be involving young people, putting them in the, you know, giving them the keys and letting them co-design and let them shape this. This is not about us. There's a few things I think that just are worth just sort of reflecting on in that, which is that, you know, it was the loss of a lot of the Erasmus funding and the European funding that was what really did for BYC, I think, in the end. And there is work, and there are, I mean, Esther talked earlier about the young ambassadors, the UK young ambassadors, who were the most active individuals who contacted us immediately after the BYC closed. But they are lobbying at every level to get UK reconnected to the Erasmus programme, but also closer to. You've seen even in the media in the last few weeks, there's possibility of a sort of youth mobility scheme across Europe. Now that all stuff is becoming reality and possible because of the work that the young ambassadors have done. But that reconnection will be really important, I think, in terms of driving that stuff. And I think we have to sort of recognise that some of those, what's gone wrong there. The other thing I wanted to recognise, which is that this is a UK-wide initiative. This is not that. So most people know NYA as the professional body for youth work in England. When it comes to this stuff, this is not about England. This is about the UK. This is about all the nations. And one of the things that really made us very happy was all the UK nations, you know, when we reached out or they came to us, immediately said, what do we do? How do we partner? Let's roll our sleeves up. Let's start again. Let's do it differently. There were, you know, since BREYC was created, devolutions happened. You know, there wasn't independent governments in Scotland, Wales, and the Northern Ireland Assembly, etc. Now there are. So the system and the model needs to be different, needs to look different, needs to function differently. And there's loads of opportunity to be able to do all of that. So I just want to say a big thank you to those UK-wide infrastructure partners and bodies, and some of them are on this call, not everybody, but you know, they've been amazing and instantly said, how do we help? I mean, no ego, no challenge. Let's all work together. And I think that talks to the volume of the desire to make this a real success. We're up and running. The report is out. People take a look at it. You organisations will be able to sign up to the new National Youth Council in the coming months. There'll be further comms and processes around that. We've got colleagues working on what the offer will look like. And we've seconded in colleagues to assist us with that, which is great. And so the work is just starting. This is like, whilst there's been months of work to get to this report, the report is literally the starting gun. We're now at the front, we're now at the starting line, but the journey is long. And there's a good few ultra marathons probably in front of us before we really, get to where we really want to get to in the end. And it might be a bit bumpy and it might be a bit lumpy and not feel quite like, but actually stick with it, work with us, put your arms around everybody and support each other, and we will definitely get there. And so, yeah, on behalf of all of us, just to thank you for your time. And my one last ask of you is we need to make as much noise about this as possible, because everybody needs to know about it. Every youth worker up and down the country, every youth project, every funder who might want to assist us, every politician, every MP, MSP, assembly member, whoever. So please use your social media, use your contacts, put this stuff into your newsletters, tell everybody about it, because we've got to create a movement across the country that drives the energy behind this, and that will ensure it's a success. And so NYA we can put our muscle behind it, but that's like 2% of the complete potential of everybody. So we need everybody's support and assistance. Thank you to our speakers. Thank you to Laura for your brilliantly taking questions from Arthur, and Arthur, it sounds like your hoodie or your t-shirt's in the post or is going to be on its way to you. That's very exciting. I know a few other people, Laura, that would like some, so you might need a bigger budget to order another batch, but I'm sure you get that all the time. But so, Laura, thank you so much for your time, because you really do inspire so many around the country, and it's amazing. Arthur, you're just a bundle of energy and so wise, and so and with young people like you in charge and driving this will be a huge success. I have no doubt it will be a huge success. So on behalf of us and to every youth worker and everybody who's working and supporting young people, thank you for what you do. Keep in touch, keep an eye on what's going on, sign up when you get your chance, and yeah, let's get going. Thank you very much.